So, there's it sounds like there's three discussions going on within the professionals, we'll call them.
Yeah.
And so one of them is ancient technology / civilization, next interdimensional, and the next extraterrestrial.
Yeah, that's how I see it, the possibilities. Maybe there are more. I haven't thought of them.
So let's I'd like to dissect kind of each one of those, with the ancient civilization stuff. I mean, what does that, at the end of this, I want to ask where you're leaning towards. But I mean, what is that if there's a civilization in the earth, in the ocean, towards the earth's, the center? I mean, what does that even look like?
Well,
what do you
right.
think?
No, we've mapped the surface of the seabed, again, very incompletely. So we don't even know. There are parts of is there underwater structures? We don't really know. Or are they deep below the geology as we know it? Again, we don't know. So but it's not a stretch to think it's possible based on the length this planet's been in existence. What's unfortunate about this whole discussion we talked about a little earlier is it's so stigmatized that few people want to be open-minded and talk like we are right now, of entertaining the possibility of an advanced technology civilization from either of those three origins. It's just not taken seriously. And I think, thank you for having me on, because it is about time we do it, because we do see evidence of them all the time in the ocean and, of course, in the atmosphere.
And you know of a Canadian USO encounter?
Oh, yeah, this is one of the earlier ones. It's in the 60s, I think early 60s, and there's a great book about it called Sweep Clear 5, and it refers to the name of this mine warfare exercise. The subtitle is NATO's Underwater UFO Encounter. And it's a very interesting book because it's written by a researcher who interviewed these Canadian divers. Now, what happened is, first off, is there was a major UFO event in Canada, a place called Shag Harbor, Nova Scotia, in, either the late 60s. I don't remember the date. And that's all over the web. But before that, there was another encounter where UFOs were seen to go into the water. And it happened I think it coincided with a NATO exercise, and the ships all got vectored to go look for these things. And Canadian divers were interviewed and claimed to have seen these two underwater discs and actual occupants outside the craft trying to repair it. So aliens. And they even said they captured video, but they don't know where the tapes are. Anyways, there's this book, Sweep Clear 5, is all about it. And it's about the investigation into that. And that's the first well-documented USO case that I know about.
Wow. Was there any description on what the beings?
There was, and I think they were humanoid. I don't remember the details. They weren't human for sure, but they were human-like.
Did they have equipment on?
I don't know. It didn't seem like they did, but maybe it was so technical that it didn't appear to be like equipment. I don't know.
Man, so I mean, what do you think? If we're on we're going through the three discussions, and if it wasn't advanced civilization that's living under the surface of the earth, whether it's in the ocean or somewhere else, I mean, how long? I mean,
well, here
there's just so many questions.
I know. I don't know, but I do know this, and this is why I like the Galileo project, because Avi Loeb articulates this so well. He and modern society doesn't appreciate how new to the scene we are in terms of everything, our behavior, and how we treat each other, and technology, and so you have to think it's just so possible that either in this large universe or in a part of the universe we've not we don't even know about. Like I said, another dimension that some advance or several. And actually, that's the thing, Shawn, is that from what I gather of all these eyewitness accounts that are out there and knowledge from credible sources that were in, that know people in these programs, the UAP programs, crash retrieval programs, that there are different types. And I mean, in fact, what's very interesting too, just today, again, I mentioned Chris Mellon. He was a former DASD, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence. So he was up there, and he knows what he's talking about, and he's been in this field for some time. He on his Substack page, account, whatever you call it, today, April 23rd, he published an article, and he had a screenshot of a signal discussion with someone who had known people in that crash retrieval program. And he said that he was very credible, didn't want to let his name out, but the person acknowledged that there was an active crash retrieval program, and that there was an Air Force gatekeeper at the SES level for it, and so there was this discussion that he published today, and he wrote a nice article about it. Basically, and what's so good about Chris, he doesn't say what he doesn't know. He says what he knows. He doesn't speculate, and he doesn't reveal sources that don't want to be revealed. And so he said, "Here's the discussion we had. This person was senior in the government, and I'm not going to reveal his name, but." He said he was aware of these programs. Wasn't read into them, but was aware and knew people who were. And so he's just putting that out there. Again, doing it because there's such an active disinformation campaign that that office, AARO, is a part of to discredit anybody who brings forth this information. And again, the highest level, the NSC, obviously, the ODNI, they don't want this information out. Now, it's worth talking about that for a little bit. Why am I coming out now if the government is doing the best thing and doesn't want the information out? And so I think they're wrong on this case. And so do my colleagues like Chris and Lou Elizondo, that at some level we should, yes, not let advanced technology come out to the public, because we don't want our adversaries getting the upper hand. Of course not. But the knowledge that we're being visited and can't secure our own water space and airspace, and that this could be something more of a global security nature, and it demands thoughtful public policy, and the public should have a part of that fact that we're being visited, and it's something that every nation is dealing with. That's something I think does not benefit us by trying to cover up, and in my personal opinion, the AARO report was so inartful and flawed and full of errors that it makes me wonder, are we that clumsy and inefficient and ineffective in other counterintelligence endeavors? I sure hope not. I hope we're not failing that badly when we're trying to perform the same kind of activity regarding Chinese and Russian intelligence services.
How many? I mean, are there a lot of countries that are digging into this? Or are we?
There are, and now I don't know of all of them, but I've had, for example, I was just contacted by an Italian researcher who has, like me, decided to focus on the underwater UAP, and he's been doing it for 20 years, perhaps, and was a colleague of this guy Carl Feint, who wrote that original book, UFOs and the Water. And so there's that. This Soul Foundation group has just brought on a European on their board. His name is Jonathan Berta, and he's neat because he's a technology guy. He's an industry. He's got his own company, and here's how his company got started. I think they do aerial drones, and I think it was in France that they were seeing all these UAPs around their nuclear sites, and they contracted his company to fly drones to observe them. That's how he kind of launched his company, and he's doing quite well. But he's one of these open-minded people, and so he brings in an international perspective to the Soul Foundation. In addition to Peter Skafish, who's the other lead, and he's got a humanities background. I think it's a sociocultural anthropology. And then you have Gary Nolan, who's got a material science and biomedical expertise, and he brings that hard science to the Soul Foundation.
Interesting. Let's get back to the underwater stuff. I want to know what else are you seeing? I mean, with your current research, what are you currently working on under there?
Well, I'm not an active investigator. I don't have a ship. I don't have the money to fund an expedition. Now, there's a couple things that I have been involved with. For example, the Galileo project. And this isn't too out there, but it's part of the whole phenomena, if you will, and field that is worth pursuing. So Galileo is looking to discover remnants of ancient civilizations, extraterrestrial technology civilizations, or active ones that are in our world observing us. So he's setting up this
strictly outside of Earth.
Well, kind of. So he's got telescopes that are looking at the near Earth atmosphere.
Okay.
And so wherever they come from. So it doesn't matter where their origin. He just wants to scientifically study them better. But here's something cool. So he studied the very first known interstellar object to impact the planet. So it was in a catalog of, I think, asteroids or objects like that I forgot who maintained it. But basically, he got some data, looked at it. It had been gathered, I think it was collected on what appeared to be a meteorite, impact the Earth over the ocean off Papua New Guinea, the Bismarck Sea. And so he had data on this. And when he looked hard at the data, he realized that this thing, its impact was not like others. We know from Space Force data that it's got an it's outside the solar system. It's an interstellar origin, just based on its trajectory. So if you're an astronomer and an astrophysicist, you can do the math and determine that based on how a meteorite comes in. So we know this thing is interstellar in origin, one, and then he looked at how it impacted, and you can again do the math through the energetics and everything, that it had a much harder material strength. So it disintegrated a lot later than others based on its speed and all these things. So it was made of something harder, not the normal iron type of composite or whatever that the normal meteorites are made of. So it impacted from outside the solar system, and it burned up a lot slower. It was made of something super hard. So what he did is he launched an expedition, got it funded, and he went and recovered fragments of that meteorite. They hit the ocean and then settled in the sea. And what happens when a meteorite does that, it burns up and it creates these sort of little metallic droplets that just sort of fall into the sky. Heavier ones fall first, and the other ones sort of just push along the trajectory and fall later. And so he went and mapped it all out. I gave him ocean data and atmospheric data so he could do a profile and figure out how far the stuff drifted in the air and then drifted in the water based on currents. And he found him. Interestingly, I was able to connect him with the group who'd done that before to go search for meteorite fragments in the ocean. We had done this NOAA had done this with NASA in a thing called the National Marine Sanctuary off the Olympic coast. And we basically built a magnetic sled with some magnets on it and towed it along the water to pick up all the metallic particles, and then had to take basically fine brush and get them all off, separate them from the mud, and then study them. So Avi did that with his team, and I didn't go out with him, but he was able to find material that was not of earthly origin. So his next expedition, which he hopes to lead in April 2025, he found the fine stuff. He thinks, it could be technology, right? And so maybe some of the bigger things that didn't burn up are out there too. So he wouldn't know it because he had a sled that was designed only for fine particles. But his next expedition, he's going to take an ROV with a camera, and he's going to go along the seafloor and look for stuff. And he kind of jokes in a lot of his writings that maybe it'll actually have a keyboard on it, and maybe there's going to be a button to push. And he always asks people, if you found something from an extraterrestrial visitor, and a gadget, like giving a caveman an iPhone. Would you push a button on it? And some people say, no, I wouldn't push the button. No way. And he says, I'm going to push the button.
Wow. I can't wait to hear what that develops into.
Yeah.
So back to the three things. We're talking about ancient civilizations. You had mentioned under the ocean and perhaps in the moon.
Well, again, this is just speculating of what is possible. And that's what Bernardo's article was titled, something about what is the most likely scenario here on the origins of UAP. And those are three. They could have been originated either from our solar system, or we think other planets are inhabitable, but that's for life as we know it. Certainly, there could be other life forms. And I told you about these they call them extremophiles, organisms on these hydrothermal vents in the ocean, super deep, high pressure, and they're weird and they're alien looking, and they've evolved to withstand the pressure and the temperature, very high temperature, hundreds of degrees, and toxic environments. So who's to say that life hasn't evolved? I mean, not our form of life, but somewhere else, either on a planet here in our solar system or elsewhere.
Well, what are the theories with the moon?
Well, I don't really. There's some chatter out there about potentially bases on the moon, like potentially undersea alien bases. I have no data on any of that, so I don't know. I'd love to talk to astronauts who've been there, but I don't know. But it's worth looking into. I know we're going to go back to the moon with Artemis. I would like to see NASA be more transparent with what maybe it's found. An example here. So when Congress directed the DoD to start looking at UAP, they established the ARROW. NASA, and this is interesting to me, with Bill Nelson, former senator, now the administrator, they decided to establish a UAP study team. And what they were doing, obviously, is Congress was interested and they were NASA. If Congress is interested in UFOs and NASA's not doing anything, and this is how you think when you're in charge of an agency, you better start doing something or else they're going to tell you how to do it. And so Bill Nelson decided to stand up a study team. And when they had a press release of their study, and there was nothing there. They talked about UAP that they need to be studied, but they didn't share one bit of data or one example. All they did was talk about it. It was embarrassing in my opinion. But that's kind of what's happening now is the government is coming out and saying things, but they're really not being forthright. Now, one more thing, but there is some sign of interesting activity. Believe it or not, I was just contacted by the National Science Foundation, and they are going to host a UAP communications workshop. No kidding. And they're inviting really credible people. They invited me. They invited, not that I'm super credible, but I'm trying, and other people like, and I actually connected them to these professors in religious studies and the humanities that I know. Diana Pasulka, have you heard her?
Mm-mm.
Oh, you should try to interview her. She is fantastic. She is a religious studies professor at NC State, and she's written 2 books, American Cosmic and Encounters. You have to read those, Shawn.
Okay.
What she does, like a lot of researchers, she just interviews people. But she's found people who have touched these crash retrieval programs, and they wish to remain anonymous, but so she gives them pseudonyms, and but that's really enlightening. And so she's found a NASA engineer who has been a part of these programs and goes through everything. In fact, the second book, they go to an area of the New Mexico desert and where crash retrievals have happened, and they find materials. And she goes with one of the directors of the Soul Foundation, Gary Nolan. She gave him a pseudonym in his book, but he's now come out and acknowledged that he's that person. And again, he wants to advance the scientific study of UAP. He's one of those people who have studied crash materials. He's looked at the material science. He's published a paper on it. And in fact, if you go to the Soul Foundation website, all of our talks are online on YouTube. And he gives a talk about that paper. And he studies these materials. And basically, he's proved they're not natural. They all had to be made with some kind of industrial process. And they're not native of this earth. They include components that have not been seen before, isotope ratios. They've never been seen before. So that's very interesting.
What kind of stuff has he recovered? Is it
The stuff I've seen in his lab are just sort of metallic fragments. Now, of course, out there, and what Dave Grush in the hearing that I attended last year, he of course has claimed that there's, I think, more than just fragments, but I don't know.
or non-human biologics?
That's right.
What does that even mean?
Alien.
Is that like a skin sample?
No, I don't know. I don't know.
Do you think Grush is